So Captain Marvel is the 21st film in the MCU, and it is of course the first MCU film to have a female lead in the role. We of course have Brie Larson playing the titular character of Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel. It was directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, of course produced by the Godmaster Kevin Feige, and of course based on a screenplay by Boden, Fleck, and some person whose name I'm not going to pronounce, so I'm just going to leave it on screen right now. The film is set in the mid-90s and it follows Carol Danvers as she becomes Captain Marvel after Earth is caught in the center of a galactic conflict between two alien races, the Kree and the Skrulls. Now, going into this movie, I really didn't know what to think about it because the trailers didn't really impress me all that much. I gotta be honest about that. I was not excited for this film based on the trailers. But of course, because it's a Marvel MCU film, I was always gonna watch it regardless. But let's just say I haven't felt this nervous about going into a film probably since Guardians of the Galaxy, but then again, even with that film, the trailers at least left me excited to go and watch it, even though I had no idea who the respective characters were. Then I saw the reviews come out, and there were a few people whose opinions I really take seriously, saying that the film was quite disappointing, and it made me even more anxious going into this, and in the end, I just wanted to really enjoy this film, and to have a really good time with it. And I will say, there are parts of this film that I do think are entertaining. There are entertaining spurts in this film where it did entertain me and I was enjoying my time with the film. I thought Samuel L. Jackson was as amazing as usual. He played a far bigger role in the film than I ultimately thought he was going to. I always thought that it was going to be quite a short appearance by him in the film, kind of like an extended cameo role, but he's really the secondary lead of the film, and all the better for it because I really loved him in this film. I just loved seeing a younger Nick Fury, a less experienced Nick Fury. He's more naive. He's not, of course, as open to the concept of aliens. And also, while talking about Nick Fury, the de-aging effects in this film on him and Clark Gregg were absolutely fantastic. This is the best de-aging I've ever seen in a film. It is ridiculous, and the fact that he's like that for the entire runtime, I can only think about how much a pain it must have been for the special effects team to have to go into every single scene and digitally do that. After the first few scenes, you don't notice it, you don't have your attention drawn towards it, and that's the best visual effects. The best visual effects for me are the ones where they don't stand out like a sore thumb, they just fit in with everything else that's in frame. I also did like Clark Gregg as Nick Coulson. It was just fun to have Coulson back because I do watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I already know his story and what happens after the Avengers, but it was just cool to see him again in a big MCU film. Now granted, his role is really nothing more than an extended cameo, but I still really liked him in the film, and like I say, just like with Nick Fury, it was really cool to just see a younger, more naive and less experienced version of this character, who, of course, we already know what will happen to him and what he becomes. But it was just cool to get to see that younger, more inexperienced side of him. I also really liked Jude Law in the film, and I really liked the character that he played, especially in the first act of the film. His character I didn't like so much towards the end, but I won't talk about it because that gets into spoilers, but I thought Jude Law's performance was fantastic. Ben Mendelsohn as the villain, I really didn't expect to like him as much as I did. When I saw him in the trailers, I just thought, oh, it's Ben Mendelsohn, Mr. McVillain. He's played the villain in Rogue One, he played the villain in The Dark Knight Rises, he played the villain in Robin Hood. He just seems like Hollywood's go-to villain, and I wasn't excited for him in this film, but his character was so funny that I was laughing my head off so many times throughout this film, and I wasn't expecting to. I genuinely didn't think his character was going to be this funny. And also, while I'm at it, the prosthetics and the makeup that they put on him when he's in his natural Skrull form, I thought was fantastic. It looked really, really good, and so that was some damn good makeup. And the makeup for all of the Skrulls I thought was really, really good. And then we have Goose the Cat. Now, as someone who's not the biggest fan of cats, I've got to say, Goose the Cat won me over. Honestly, I love Goose the Cat now. I love him. But even with all those positives, I have to be honest, I was actually quite disappointed by Captain Marvel. And I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't bored on a few occasions by this movie, or at the very least, very frustrated by a lot of the things that were happening on screen. And the most saddening part of this entire film, in my opinion, is that the weakest part of the entire film is Captain Marvel herself. I genuinely think she was the weakest part of the film. Now, as for the performance by Brie Larson, she is okay. However, I never got that true sense of, oh, she is Carol Danvers, she is Captain Marvel. It didn't click with me in this film when I was watching it. Now, granted, I have full faith that hopefully that will be rectified in Endgame with the Russo brothers. I just felt like Brie Larson was playing the same character from beginning to end with the same face, with the same voice, and the same thought and same character. She didn't really change her acting in terms of this film to show that the character had been on an arc, that the character had actually had a change in her. I didn't feel that with her performance, and this links perfectly with the writing. The writing for Carol Danvers is probably the weakest out of any of the characters in this entire film. We have quick montages of her flashbacks because of course this film uses the amnesia trope, and it could have been done well, except all of the flashback sequences that you have seen in the trailers for this film, that is literally it. That is all the flashback sequences in this film, and they are all shown in these quick 2-second montages, which rob us of any chance to have a sense of connection or to get a better insight into this character's past. This is the character that is meant to be kicking Thanos' ass in a month and a half, and I honestly could not have cared about her character. Why did they cut these segments? Why are these segments only 2 seconds long? I have no idea why the film did not think to maybe cut out some of the jokes in this film that don't work, which there are quite a few of, or some of the poorly edited action sequences, which I'll get onto later. Why could you not cut some of these things out and instead have one of these flashback sequences and actually flesh it out, actually give your main character of this film something that actually helps the audience connect with her? Because I felt no connection to Captain Marvel throughout this entire film, and because the film gives nothing to us as an audience to connect with her, she doesn't change in this film. She goes on no character arc. She starts and ends the film the exact same way. Amnesia storyline and her discovering these memories could have been such a fantastic way to have us connect with this character. A great example of this was in the Bourne trilogy. Jason Bourne was a character that us as an audience and him as a character, we knew nothing about him, and we learned things at the same rate as him, and it helps us connect with him because we see his initial reactions to things as we are reacting to them at the same pace as he is. It gives us that connection to that character. With here, they throw that all away just so it can be like, oh, let's just show it for 2 seconds because, you know, gotta have them jokes in the film. So with that down the drain, we really don't get an idea of what motivates her, what she stands for. It's also unclear what her powers are. I never got a good sense of what they were or how powerful she is. The film just does such a terrible job with her as a character. She was easily my least favourite character in the film. Again, I am not hating on Brie Larson, but I'm saying that her performance, for me, it didn't make up for these errors. I'm just praying that the Russo brothers can rectify this in a month and a half's time with Infinity War, because based on first impressions, I was not a big fan of Carol Danvers in this film. I thought the action, like I mentioned earlier, was very, very weak in this film. A lot of the time it was either lit so darkly that you could not tell what was happening, which was either maybe done to hide the poor stunt work or the fact that the actors weren't doing the actual action sequences themselves. And a lot of the time the editing is atrocious. There's one scene in particular where, I think this was released as a clip before the film released in cinemas, but there's a clip where Ben Mendelsohn in disguise is having a fight scene with Samuel L. Jackson, and there was literally such an absurd amount of cuts in the fight that it honestly made my eyes bleed, and it's like that for a lot of them. Why is there this need for this quick cut editing? Yes, it worked in Winter Soldier because they had establishing wide shots to show you what was happening. There's none of that here. It's just quick cut editing because you've got a 70-year-old man fighting Ben Mendelsohn. This style of action, it's not acceptable anymore. Apart from the fight sequence in the first act of the film, where Captain Marvel is cuffed in hand bracelets and she has to fight her enemies and she has to punch them really hard to actually get these things off of her. That was the only one in the entire film that felt sort of memorable. The rest of them, for me, I really only have fragmented memories of, even 3 days or 4 days even after walking out of the theatre. There's also no sense of direction in this film. There is nothing unique about the way that the film is shot or the way that the film is directed on the whole to help it stand out from the rest of these films. There's nothing unique to it. You know, with the Russo bros, they have a very gritty approach to their films. Whedon likes to have a bit of comedy, but also likes to have camera movements that make you really feel involved during conversations with the heroes. Captain Marvel doesn't have that. There's nothing unique to it. I found the film looked very dull from a visual standpoint. There was a filter that they used throughout the entire thing that I just was not digging at all. It just didn't click with me, and it didn't look that pretty to look at. I can really name a lot of other Marvel films that looked way better visually than this film, in my opinion. I could not have been able to tell that this movie was directed by the same people who made Half Nelson, which is one of my favourite films of all time. Honestly, if you have not seen that movie, check it out. because that film is directed masterfully. And in here, if I hadn't have known who directed this film beforehand, I wouldn't have been able to tell that these were the same people behind that, because there was no comparison in them with a directing standpoint. It just felt so run-of-the-mill to me. And also this film struggles to commit to a tone. It's almost like it can't decide what film it wants to be. It tries to play with this, 90s nostalgia vibe. They tried to have this fish out of water part to it. They tried to have this buddy cop element with Sam Jackson and Brie Larson, who I will admit have very good chemistry in their scenes. But like I say, there are so many things happening with this film, and it just does not stick to a single tone. It felt like, honestly, all of these scenes are so different. They could have been directed by different people for all I know, because they felt so different in stark contrast to one another. One moment it's a 90s nostalgia film, then it's a fish out of water storyline, then it's a Guardians of the Galaxy ripoff that's just not as good, then it's a buddy cop film with Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson. It can't decide what it wants to be. And I feel like that lack of a focused tone and direction in this film mainly comes from the fact of how many people there are behind the scenes working on this film. It must have had some role to play in this, because I mean, there are 5 people credited with writing the story, there's 3 people credited with the screenplay, you've got 2 people directing the film. There just feels like there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and as a result, the film suffers from it from a directing and tone standpoint. And I feel like in the end of the day, this film just had too many things it had to do. It had to act as a prequel to every MCU film other than Captain America the First Avenger. It had to be an origin story for Captain Marvel. It had to make you care about this character and give her a good enough story so you care about her in Endgame. It had to show Nick Fury and Coulson as younger, less experienced agents. It had to flesh out the intergalactic side more of the MCU. I just felt there was too many things going on in this film that it had to try and achieve, and as a result it just ends up with parts that it does well and other parts where it just doesn't do them to their full potential. And lastly, I just felt there was way too many slow segments in the film, especially in the first and second act. There are so many sequences where it's literally just characters spouting out exposition, and it just got boring after a while. And I'm just sat there thinking, Marvel movies aren't like this. Marvel films don't usually have this much exposition thrown at the audience, and in this film there's just way too much of it for my liking, and I just felt as a result it left me quite bored in most of those parts. Now granted, this is fixed sort of in the final act, but even the final act itself, even though there's action and you're somewhat entertained by it happening, the actual twist involved with it didn't really result in a final battle that I cared all that much about. Again, I can't go into it in great detail because I don't want to spoil the film, but you'll know what I mean when you see it, and I just felt very disappointed with it because this amount of exposition, for me, doesn't belong in a Marvel film. Overall, I just felt very disappointed with Captain Marvel. Once again, this is not a terrible film. You can watch this film. You can be entertained by elements of this film. But I just feel as if, considering what Marvel have made before and the expectations going into this film, I just think there was way too much placed on its hands. And as a result, it just fell under that weight of what it was supposed to accomplish. And for those reasons, I'm going to give Captain Marvel the rating of a 6 out of 10. Look, this is just my opinion, it's not a fact. If you love the MCU, I know you're going to watch this movie regardless. And if you love this film, that's great. I'm really happy you were able to find an element of enjoyment with this film. I just personally could not see anything in this film that made it stand out or feel unique, or made it feel like it truly stood apart from the rest of the MCU. I genuinely think this is one of the worst of films in the MCU. I mean, it's not exactly to the level of Thor the Dark World or Iron Man 2 or Iron Man 3, but it's certainly not far off. And for what this film should have been for Marvel's first female-led superhero film, it just didn't live up to its expectations. So thank you very much for watching my review for Captain Marvel. Again, I apologise for this being so late. I just want to quickly say that for those of you going into the comment sections, please be respectful for other people's opinions. People can like this film, they're entitled to their own opinions, so try and keep it civil in the comment section. I'm just saying that because I've seen quite a few fights and other people's reviews of this film in the comment sections. So try and keep it chill, as it usually is there. Just saying that in advance. Give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I hope to see you all again for the next video. Goodbye.